Chapter 991, Oni Shinko. With this in mind, the next moment his body suddenly sank into the ground. Oni Shinko's long sword fell empty-handed. After a short moment, in front of Tsukuyomi, a human figure suddenly appeared from the ground. The ability to harmonize with all things was the ability to blend in with any surrounding environment and obtain corresponding abilities. Earth and Trick was one of those abilities. Shieji came to Tsukuyomi's front, and the military dagger in his hand stabbed at her dark pupils. However, the Oni child, who had originally been tens of meters away, disappeared in an instant, and then reappeared behind Tsukuyomi. Clang! Anakiri stopped the military dagger with pinpoint accuracy, and Shinkiri slashed at Shieji's neck. Shieji had to parry the attacks of the demon while retreating to dissipate his powerful force. Every slash of the demon's sword made his arm tingle with terrifying power. It was clear that fighting head-on was not the right solution. However, it can instantly move to the side of Tsukuyomi, and the surprise attack method seems useless. But if it is this kind of spirit that follows, then its range must be limited. Shieji thought about this and once again used his earth-bending ability to dive underground. Tsukuyomi looked at the scene before him and gained some understanding of Shieji's abilities. She extended her right hand towards Anakakoro. Get this rat out. Anakakoro's body was surrounded by black and red supernatural energy. He whimpered in a low voice, like an evil spirit from the underworld. Then he flipped his sword back, and the two huge samurai swords were suddenly thrust into the ground. Thunderclap. The powerful supernatural power directly caused the land beneath his feet to crumble apart, and even the hard permafrost layer crumbled into dust like tofu. Amidst the rubble, the figure of Shieji could no longer be hidden. Without hesitation, he turned and fled towards the depths of the poisonous miasma. Chase him! Tsukuyomi gazed coldly at the direction in which Shieji had fled and gave the order. Onigami took Tsukuyomi's hand and, carrying her on his shoulders, charged at the poisonous miasma with his dual swords. Onigami was so fast that he caught up with Shieji in the poisonous miasma in less than 5 seconds. The huge double swords slashed left and right, and the supernatural powers of red and black turned into a tangible sword light that kept coming at Shieji. Harmony of all things. In an instant, Shieji completed his own transformation. His eyes flashed with a dark light. This time, the trident military bayonet in his hand accurately blocked the ghost's attack. Compared to the first time, he was more at ease in dealing with it. His ability to harmonize with all things, like a chameleon, allowed him to better adapt to his environment. Even, to adapt to the other party's abilities. The longer he fought his opponent, the more he would adapt to his fighting style, and his body would spontaneously evolve. Now, he had quickly adapted to the violent fighting style of the demon child, Toru. And now, it was time to perform. 2 swords against the trident and pistol. It was a barrage so fast that the naked eye could hardly catch it. 1 ghost slash and 1 god slash, slashing down at Shieji like crazy. The earth wailed in agony, and the ground beneath their feet crumbled. Shieji responded with the trident military bayonet. Although there was a difference in power, and he was constantly retreating, he was not in a difficult situation, but was responding relatively calmly. And in the gaps in his defense, he was able to use origin bullets to attack the ghost and god, looking for weaknesses in his body. As long as it was made from supernatural energy, it would definitely be affected by the origin bullets. The degree of influence would depend on the strength of the supernatural energy. Clatter. Shieji quickly emptied a magazine, and the black eggshell fell to the ground. The next moment, the ground beneath his feet was shattered by a slash from the sword of the demon. As the two fought their way through, the surrounding city buildings were affected by the aftereffects and collapsed one after the other. However, Shieji was in no hurry at all, and deliberately led Tsukuyomi into the narrow alleyways of the ruined city. Then, taking advantage of the narrow terrain of the alleyways, he maneuvered and counterattacked. Tsukuyomi sat on the shoulder of the demon and watched him coldly. Until he broke through the demon, Shieji could not hurt her at all. Swish! Swish! Two blazing sword lights crossed and slashed, and Xieji narrowly avoided them by ducking to the side and running into the adjacent alleyway. A cross-shaped opening was directly cut into the side of a building, allowing light to shine in from the front and back. The ghostly figure gave chase, turning into the alleyway. But the moment he appeared at the entrance to the alleyway, two silver grenades suddenly appeared beneath his feet. In an instant, blinding white light engulfed everything around. Xieji clung to the wall with one hand, suspended in midair as he watched the scene before him. Origin grenade. I wonder how much of a threat it can be to you in this narrow terrain. And at that moment, the familiar sound of a bamboo flute rang in his ears once again. Xieji frowned. Another illusion? But I'm really sorry, this ability is useless to me. Amidst the exploding smoke and dust, Anakoro came out unscathed. But this time, Xieji always felt that something was different. The thick black smoke from the huge demon body was like a wisp of smoke. A more terrifying, more evil, and darker feeling appeared. Tsukuyami finished playing the bamboo flute and said coldly to Xieji, "My abilities are useless to you, but if they are useful to others, that's good." Xieji frowned. He felt a dangerous aura enveloping him. He was surprised and puzzled by Tsukuyami's words. If the illusion was not being used on him, then who was it for? There were no comrades nearby. Suddenly, an odd thought came to his mind. Could it be that you are trying to block my signal transmission? On the command center side, the new number that was originally communicating with the Xieji suddenly became chaotic, and the screen became incredibly blurry. Even the staff members responsible for monitoring this side began to become dazed. In the end, they even reached out and grabbed their necks, trying to kill themselves. When the others around them saw this, they hurriedly came over to stop them. However, after hearing the eerie melody of the bamboo flute, they all felt dizzy and lightheaded. A captain in the crowd was quick-witted and directly cut off the signal transmission, preventing the sound from continuing to play. This allowed the staff to recover. Rhythm illusion. He saw through the problem at once. It's just that his target of attack was not the Xieji, but the staff here. Why did he do this in the first place? The signal being cut off made Li Tianyang and the others a little dissatisfied. Now is the critical moment of the battle. How can the chain fall? What's wrong? Restore communication as soon as possible. Chapter 992, The Pirates. Xieji hung his body in midair, planning to find a way to break through Tsukuyami's Oni and then kill her true body. But suddenly, he saw an incredibly terrifying sight. The already murderous demon god's body became even more enormous and terrifying in the rolling thick fog. A thick black smoke rose up into the sky, completely enveloping the demon god. Xieji's eyes slowly widened, and his pupils shrank to the size of green beans from fear. In front of the demon god's child, Tsukuyami's eyes also became dark, cold, and evil. Now no one is watching. You can die. On the command center side, the lost communication was only restored a few minutes later. When they connected the video, they found that the scene in front of them had flipped 90 degrees. There were only two possibilities for this angle: either the equipment had fallen, or someone from the Xieji had fallen to the ground. Li Tianyang's heart tightened, and he quickly leaned over the command desk and shouted, "Xieji, Xieji! What is the situation now?" But he didn't get any response. Is it possible that Captain Xieji has been killed? A cold sweat broke out on the forehead of an officer. It had only been a few minutes since they had lost sight of him and then regained contact. They didn't know what had happened in between. It was only when the smart device inside the combat uniform fell off and there was no way to contact the person that something extremely bad had most likely happened. Li Tianyang gritted his teeth and his face was extremely gloomy. "Xieji, Xieji, answer me." Finally, there was a response in the camera. A pair of feet and clogs appeared in the camera. They were very small feet, wrapped in white cotton socks, and the red skirt on the calf could be seen. It seemed that they heard the voice in the communication device, and one foot slowly lifted up and then stepped on the camera. From the Operations Command Center's perspective, what they saw was a small foot wearing white cotton socks stepping on their faces. Click! The lens cracked, and it was worthy of being military equipment, hard enough. But the foot stepped the equipment into the soil, and it also completely lost their field of view. That was Tsukuyomi's foot. An officer muttered, his voice a little bitter, unable to help but swallow. Everyone looked at Li Tianyang. The situation was clear. Xieji's chances of survival were slim. Li Tianyang angrily slammed his fist on the command platform. Impossible. With Xieji's abilities, even if he couldn't defeat his opponent, he couldn't have been killed so quickly. Tsukuyomi's abilities definitely couldn't have done that. Xieji, with the ability to harmonize all things, had top-notch survival skills. Even if he encounters an opponent who is stronger than him, he can quickly target the opponent's abilities and optimize his own abilities. Everyone knows that in a duel between mutants, the restraint relationship between ability attributes is particularly important. So even if Xieji can't beat someone, he can still easily escape for his life. Unless he encounters someone whose strength surpasses him by too much, he will be killed before he has a chance to use his abilities. But was Neon's Tsukuyomi really that powerful? Li Tianyang's eyes were full of hatred. Neon will not allow such a powerful existence. She must have used something we don't know about. At this time, Situ Xian said leisurely, the people of Neon are the most treacherous and cunning. They have followed the principle of subordinates surpassing superiors since ancient times, and they are always thinking about dominating. These guys, I'm afraid, won't reveal their true strength so easily, he said meaningfully. Do you really understand the strength of these people? This sentence served as a reminder to everyone in the East Sea region. Since the end of the world, their only concern has been the Columbia Navy. Countries like Neon and Scylla have never even been in their sights. Because the strength of the East Sea region is indeed overpowering, with a large amount of weaponry, excellent troops, and top-notch mutants. Neon, a country whose military has been under control for a century, does not have a decent armed force. However, it does not mean that they do not have powerful mutants. Li Tianyang's face was gloomy and terrifying. Before Li Long was killed, he was a little gloating and looked down on the Jiangnan region. But so soon, their captain was also killed. To be honest, death is commonplace on the battlefield. But it was true that the captain of a fleet that their own region had spent a lot of resources training had died in battle. It was definitely not true to say that they were not heartbroken. After a long silence, Li Tianyang said, update the information on Tsukuyomi immediately and mark her supernatural ability index as unknown. Notify all the mutants on the island to be on the lookout for this guy. The death of Xieji sounded a wake-up call for everyone. Only on the battlefield could one see the true depths of a person or a force. The existence that was blown up before the battle and praised to the skies might not have much power to rule on the battlefield. And some people who hide their talents will also show their sharp claws, surprising everyone. For example, Zhang Yi, for example, Tsukuyomi. You never know how strong the opponent you are going to face next really is. Don't be fooled by appearances, and don't underestimate any opponent. While everyone on their side cautiously advances, trying to find the source of God, there was such a special team that also appeared around the Misty Valley. The members of the Sky Dragon Pirates, who were not affiliated with any country and traversed the Starry Sea, also joined the fight for the source of God. The Sky Dragon King was one of the first to receive the information. It could even be said that he arrived at Star Island before the other forces. However, the information he initially obtained was obviously not as good as that of the other powers. He could only determine that the source of God was located on Star Island. Therefore, he organized the elite members of his crew and boarded this island nation. There were no shortage of outstanding talents in the pirate crew. After analyzing and exploring the strange poisonous miasma, they also arrived at the edge of the Misty Valley. The shrinking of the poisonous circle also increased the probability of encountering each team. The Sky Dragon King had brought all the skilled mutants under his command on this trip in order to obtain the source of God and restore the prestige of the Sky Dragon Pirates. They included his second-in-command, Bai Lian, and the 4 surviving fleet captain. The Sky Dragon King led them to the edge of the misty valley. It was a desolate wasteland, surrounded by dead trees frozen into ice sculptures and large areas of loose rocks. The Sky Dragon King's tall figure stood at the front of the procession. He looked at the even denser poisonous miasma ahead, and a look of excitement appeared in his eyes. "I can already feel a powerful force there." Chapter 993, Helheim. Upon hearing the Sky Dragon King say this, the deputy captain, Bai Lian, immediately bowed in praise. "Congratulations, Lord Sky Dragon King, as long as you obtain the Source of God, you will definitely be able to advance to the Epsilon rank. By then, Huashu Kingdom and Columbia will have to treat you with respect. From then on, the East Sea region will be at the mercy of the Sky Dragon pirates." Several captain-lieutenants also began to flatter the Sky Dragon King. "By then, we will make sure those guys in the Jiangnan region never set foot on the sea again. We will show them whose territory the East Sea really is. And we will make them hand over the murderer of Nerit and the others." The Sky Dragon King's mouth curled up into a pleased smile. It was impossible to make Jiangnan hand over Zhang Yi and Linghu Feishue. He was not arrogant enough to be that presumptuous. But at least after he had been promoted to Epsilon, the Huashu Kingdom could no longer frighten him into hiding in his bunker, as it had done before, by simply sending a small fleet of ships. "The Source of God, I will obtain it." The Sky Dragon King clenched his fist and said in a deep voice. And as they began to move forward, preparing to enter the depths of the misty valley, in an area ahead, a strange churning began in the dense, dark green poisonous miasma. After the Sky Dragon pirates stepped into the area ahead, suddenly, from the depths of the thick poisonous miasma, dark green figures emerged one after the other. They were all wearing clothes that were so dark green they looked black, and they had gas masks on their heads. Their arms and legs were unusually exposed and were a creepy dark purple. In particular, their fingernails were 3 to 4 centimeters long and were all dark purple. They were like ghosts, and from the depths of the poisonous miasma, they surrounded the members of the Sky Dragon pirates. Sky Dragon King and the others were initially unaware. But when they realized that there was an unusual fluctuation in the surrounding poisonous miasma, they had already fallen completely into the trap set by those strange men. "Stop! There's an ambush. Don't move." The Sky Dragon King raised his right hand to signal for everyone to stop. All the members of the group immediately assumed combat positions. However, the strange men kept walking, continuing to close in on them. By the time the pirates realized they were there, the strange men were already within 20 meters of them. It was so faint that it could be seen with the naked eye. This caused everyone to feel a chill. The strength of the person who could get so close without them noticing must be extraordinary. Deputy Team Leader Bai Lian, holding a magnificent iron fan in her hand, scanned the surrounding strange people warily. They looked like walking corpses, without even the slightest sense of existence. But seeing them always evoked the deepest fear in people, for some reason. Who the hell are these guys? Among the various teams that had landed on the island, very few of them had acted in large groups. Even in the mutant team, those below the deputy captain would almost always be reduced to cannon fodder in encounters. As a result, later on, many captains would adopt the strategy of acting alone. Unless they had a deputy with special abilities, they would not even bring their deputies along. But these weirdos were shadowy and there were hundreds of them. Just as they were about to fight, a single voice came from the hundreds of weirdos. "Sky Dragon Pirates, a group led by Li Fengxian. This is not a place you should be, so leave quickly. Otherwise, you will be punished by the Columbia Navy. Listen carefully, this is the last time, leave immediately." The voice came from all directions, echoing in everyone's ears. The Sky Dragon King frowned. It was a member of the Lock of Hell. Is there a clone around? Then his original body must not be far away. Bai Lian looked at the Sky Dragon King. "Lord Sky Dragon King, are we going to go to war with the Columbia Navy?" The Sky Dragon King's gaze became incredibly gloomy. It was so difficult to find this place, and now it was simply impossible to let them go. If he could not obtain the source of God and further improve his strength, then in the future he would only become an eel in the East Sea. He would be like those monsters that hide in the depths of the sea without eyes. He would no longer be the powerful and fearless Tianlong that soared through the sky and roamed the seas. But at the moment, if he went to war with the people in front of him, it would be like tearing his face off in front of the Columbia Navy. In that case, it would be a death sentence. I'm afraid that we won't even be able to leave Star Island. After thinking for a while, the Sky Dragon King suddenly shouted, "I am Li Fengxian, the leader of the Sky Dragon Pirates. I wonder which one of you is from the Helllock. Our Sky Dragon Pirates have always had a friendly relationship with the Columbia Navy. We have never offended you, and we have even aligned ourselves with you in terms of blockading the Huashu Kingdom. Therefore, we are not your enemies." Deep in the poisonous miasma was a strange man also wearing a dark green combat uniform and a gas mask. A member of the Helllock, his codename was Hellhorse and also known as Helsing. His supernatural ability index was 9,600 points. His ability index was lower than Vito Baldia's. However, above the Misty Valley, which was full of poisonous miasma, the effect of his abilities could be even more powerful than Baldia's. At this time, Hirschstein was hidden deep in the poisonous miasma. This was a natural barrier for him. He spoke with General Horn at the command center, reporting the situation here without haste or worry. "I encountered the enemy at the edge of the Misty Valley. It was the group of pirates from the Southeastern Sea." General Horn was also surprised to hear this. Pirates? All the officers in the command center felt extremely ridiculous. This battle was a war between the major powers of the ocean. Although the number of people involved was not large, they represented the top combat power in their respective regions. What's more, behind each of them stood a force that the Sky Dragon Pirates could never afford to provoke. Are these pirates crazy? How dare they come here to cause trouble at a time like this? Horn's eyes were full of murderous intent. Clutie asked beside him, "Do we want to go to war with them? But the Sky Dragon Pirates do have a certain amount of strength. And there, we only have Hershiest." Sky Dragon King Li Fengxian, supernatural ability index 9,800 points. This piece of information was hardly a secret. But General Horn hardly hesitated at all. Leaning on the command platform with both hands, he said in an uncompromising tone, "Hershiest, get rid of them. The battlefield is cruel, and any possible threat must be eliminated." As for whether Hirschstein could deal with the Sky Dragon Pirates, the opponent's ability index was 9,800 points, and there were more than a dozen elite pirates following him. And Hirschstein's ability index was only 9,600 points. Horn recited the data provided by the intelligence department, but a cruel and confident smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Therefore, the advantage is mine." Chapter 994, Spreading the Plague. After receiving Horn's order, Hirschstein responded coldly, "Received." At the same time, the strange people who surrounded the Sky Dragon Pirates all walked forward together. "Drop your weapons and put your hands behind your heads, and I can spare your lives." The strange people in the poisonous miasma surrounded them like a wall. The Sky Dragon Pirates had no idea what to make of the situation. If they attacked, it would be the same as breaking with the Columbia Navy. But if they didn't attack, they would obviously be captured. The Sky Dragon King quickly made a decision. "Kill!" He roared, and his clothes instantly burst open. His sturdy muscles bulged, and then a luster like black iron appeared. Soon he transformed into his own demonic form, Diamond Armor Dragon. "If you want war, then I'll give you war," the Sky Dragon King roared. The pirates around him also laughed out loud, and various supernatural abilities were deployed, fighting with the strange soldiers. Hundreds of soldiers charged over, with a dozen soldiers besieging one person, and a fierce battle began. These soldiers' fighting skills were very strong, and their strikes were extremely heavy. Especially when they collided with each other, it felt like they were hitting cold steel. The Sky Dragon King transformed into a hundreds of meters long dragon and hovered in the air, surveying his surroundings with cold eyes. The fog was too thick, and he could not see where the strange soldiers were being manipulated from. Vajra body. The Sky Dragon King's huge body circled around with great force, and the immense power directly swept hundreds of soldiers flying. Dragon flame. He opened his huge mouth and spat out a raging black flame 100 meters long, which began to burn the surrounding poisonous miasma. Encountering the ultra-high temperature flame, the poisonous miasma was quickly burned clean. The members of the pirate group shouted excitedly at the sight, "Lord Sky Dragon King is mighty! Lord Sky Dragon King is mighty!" The Sky Dragon King and White Lotus did not feel the slightest bit of relief, however. Because they were so familiar with the Columbia Navy, they were the true overlords of the ocean region. They would not easily start a war without being absolutely certain of victory. Even the Washu Kingdom, which was in a state of rivalry with Columbia for supremacy, had to admit, it was true that Columbia was evil, but it could not be said that Columbia's cooking was bad. They could not believe that they would be able to strike the other side so easily. Sure enough, while the mutants under their command were still cheering, suddenly, one of the pirates felt something tickling his arm. He raised his arm and took a look, and what his eyes saw instantly made his face turn pale with fear. The fake combat uniform on his arm had now been corroded, with 7 or 8 large holes. The flesh inside was turning pale at a rate visible to the naked eye, and then continuing to turn dark green, and then quickly black. Soon, his flesh rotted away, and the intense pain made him let out a miserable wail. Ah! The Sky Dragon King and Bai Lian looked at him, but soon, they weren't the only ones wailing. Almost half of the team members developed the exact same symptoms. Their bodies were covered in large, festering sores, and soon their bones were visible. The wounds continued to spread. It was poison. Bai Lian's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Anyone who came into contact with those soldiers just now has been poisoned. Some of the pirates couldn't take it anymore, and drew their swords to cut off the flesh on their arms, stomachs, and thighs that had been corroded. Those who acted quickly were lucky, but some of them had too many injuries to cut off all of them. Moreover, in this environment full of poisonous miasma and extremely cold, not to mention cutting off limbs, exposing large areas of wounds would also be certain death. And the worst thing was that the Sky Dragon pirates had no information about their hidden enemy. However, all their information had been transmitted to the Hershey's data system as soon as possible. In the midst of the poisonous miasma, Hershey looked cold and mechanical. He suddenly reached down and lifted the lower part of his gas mask, revealing his jaw. It was half a rotting and repulsive face, with white teeth showing in the mouth, and even the lips were gone. But he opened that evil mouth and breathed in large mouthfuls of the dark green, terrifying miasma. Helsing, the Norse god of plague. Helsing was aptly named. His power was poison, the most terrifying poison. His power was called spreading plague. He himself was a huge source of plague. Moreover, he could devour all the toxins in the world and use them for himself. So when he appeared in the battlefield of Misty Valley, his power was also enhanced to the extreme. That was why General Horn was so sure that he alone could wipe out the entire Sky Dragon pirates. The ability index was sometimes just a number. The poor pirates were just a bunch of sea beggars in his eyes. They didn't have the most advanced weapons and equipment, nor a strong intelligence system. In such a duel with a huge power gap, he didn't know how Helsist was going to lose. Hershey had absorbed the dense poisonous miasma around him. Soon, purified and even more concentrated poisons were excreted from his pores and vented out through the exhaust vents in his special combat uniform. In no time at all, his body was surrounded by this disgusting poison gas, which could easily kill a whale. The poison gas quickly coalesced and took shape, then turned into a humanoid form that looked exactly like him. Army of Calamity. As long as he was on this land, he could obtain the purest toxins and summon these soldiers of disaster endlessly. They were inherently powerful fighters. The most terrifying thing was that they were covered in lethal toxins. With their poor equipment, the Sky Dragon pirates could not withstand its corrosion. Just one hit was almost certain death. The Sky Dragon pirates had already suffered casualties before they even saw the enemy. Those who had been poisoned endured bone-rattling pain, and even though they knew they wouldn't survive, they had to cut off the corroded parts. But after they cut them off, they would also die quickly. The Sky Dragon King was furious, and a furious dragon roar came from his mouth. Black supernatural light shined all around him, and after a moment, another diamond-armored dragon exactly like him appeared from the black light. The ability to split into two Mirage Dragon. The two dragons stood back to back, their long bodies reaching forward, before spewing out a slender jet of black flame. The flame was nearly 1,000 meters long and instantly incinerated the poisonous Miasma and the soldiers of disaster before them into ashes. In less than 10 seconds, the two dragons, in a spinning motion, cleared a radius of 1 kilometer around them. Chapter 995, Twin Dragons, Hell Horses. The Sky Dragon King transformed into twin dragons and burned away the surrounding poisonous Miasma and the soldiers of disaster, who were full of poison, with super high-temperature dragon fire. This bought the pirate group a certain amount of breathing space. However, it wasn't long before the surrounding poisonous Miasma surged over again. This was the Misty Valley, the center of the poisonous Miasma, and any gaps that appeared would be quickly filled in. Unless he could remove all the poison Miasma from Star Island, there was no way he could resolve this crisis. And hidden in the poison Miasma, the second wave of soldiers of disaster loomed, surrounding them like zombies. The Sky Dragon King felt a little heavy-hearted. Escaping from here was not a problem for him at all. But once he left, his subordinates would have a hard time fending off the endless attacks from the other side. Deputy Captain Bailien saw the difficulty the Sky Dragon King was facing. He also knew that if he wanted to break the stalemate, he had to find the mutant hiding in the shadows. So he said to the Sky Dragon King, "Lord Sky Dragon King, you go find the mutant in the shadows. We'll hold the fort here." The Sky Dragon King looked at his deputy and knew in his heart that this was the correct course of action. And just at that moment, a large group of Calamity soldiers approached in a wall, looking numb and dull. A cold warning came from their mouths. "Sky Dragon pirates, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately and give up resistance, or we will kill you all. The members of the Hell Lock are all here, so don't resist needlessly." These words made the pirates even more desperate. Due to the absolute inequality in terms of information, they had no idea who the enemy was they were facing. Even less did they know how many enemies were in hiding. If there were multiple members of the Inferno chain here, apart from the Sky Dragon King and the deputy leader, Bailien, no one else would have any strength to resist and they would just have to wait to die. But the Sky Dragon King was not so easily fooled. Anyone who could become the Pirate King had to be extraordinary in terms of courage and intelligence, except for someone surnamed Lou from the 3rd generation. So when he heard Helsic's warning, he let out a sneer at the corner of his mouth and said aloud, "If there were really that many members of the Hellish Lock here, you wouldn't be acting like this." After he said that, he let out a long howl as he looked up at the sky, and a black pillar of light shot straight up into the heavens. Soon after, a thick cloud began to form with that black pillar of light at its center. The sky was gray and white with clouds, and it was already snowing heavily. As the drama unfolded, it soon turned into a dark, heavy cloud. Crackling. Huge hailstones rained down from the cloud, covering an area of nearly 10 kilometers around. The huge dragon heads of the two dragons, incarnations of the Sky Dragon King, began spewing high-temperature flames in all directions. The temperature in the surrounding area quickly rose, and the hail began to melt before it hit the ground, turning into rain. Clattering. It was a magical sight to see rain falling in the midst of a bitter cold winter. One of the Sky Dragon King's powers was the ability to summon rain. The rain fell from the sky like a deluge. The heavy particles of the poisonous miasma were wrapped in the rain and quickly diluted. The surrounding area became clearer and clearer. Hershit, who had been hiding in the depths of the poisonous miasma, looked up at the sky and muttered, "I haven't seen rain in a long time." His figure was finally captured by the Sky Dragon King. The Sky Dragon King glared at the guy in the gas mask in the distance, let out a deafening dragon roar, and the two dragons spiraled up into the sky. Invite thunder and attract lightning. Thunder roared in the cumulonimbus clouds, and one after the other, huge spherical bolts of lightning seemed to fall slowly but actually quickly towards Hirschstein. But Hirschstein was unruffled at this time. He enjoyed it, opening his arms wide and letting the rain wash over his body, which was filled with a poisonous miasma. What a wonderful rain! His hands slowly dropped, and then a powerful suction force appeared in his arms. The dark green poison on the ground gurgled into his arms. He casually waved his right hand forward, and a semicircular barrier of dark green poison, mixed with the stench of his supernatural powers, appeared in front of him. Spherical lightning struck one after the other, smashing against the dark green barrier, and all one could hear was the sound of cracking. The venom was being constantly evaporated by the thunder, but Hirschstein could also replenish it from the pool of venom beneath his feet. Standing in the middle of this battlefield, he was able to bring his abilities into perfect play. The Sky Dragon King watched from afar, but did not dare to approach. Because the opponent was covered in poison, if they fought up close, they could pose a huge threat. However, even though he did not attack, Hirschstein would not give him time to catch his breath. He crossed his arms in front of him, and a large amount of venom began to bubble as if it were boiling. These bubbles soon expanded and became as tall as a person. Then from these green bubbles, one disaster soldier after another emerged, covered in mucus. Kill them! Helsing gave the order coldly. A large number of Doom soldiers began to attack the pirates. Helsing himself took out a long military bayonet from his tactical backpack, which glowed with a pale green light. Needless to say, it was laced with poison. I'm afraid that just touching the skin would immediately cause it to rot. He stared at the Sky Dragon King, his eyes devoid of emotion. According to the intelligence service, Sky Dragon King's most formidable ability is close combat. Although in terms of close combat, Hirschstein was not sure he could win against the opponent. But he had ways to spread venom on Sky Dragon King's body. No matter what kind of steel-reinforced bones it was, after being contaminated by the poison, it would also scream in pain and beg for mercy. Sky Dragon King and the White Lotus below exchanged glances. The White Lotus gave him a wink and nodded silently. The meaning was, just leave it to him. The Sky Dragon King hesitated no longer and instantly charged towards Hirschstein. The first to charge was naturally his Mirage Dragon clone. He wanted to see just how much damage the poison-playing enemy in front of him could do to him. Soldiers of disaster kept emerging from the venom and charging towards the pirate on the ground. Bailien's eyes were cold as he swung his iron fan with all his strength. Dance, Frost White Lotus. The iron fan elegantly swept around, and the furious wind of the ice storm instantly formed a storm around him, sweeping away the soldiers of disaster that came from all directions. The bodies formed from the venomous liquid were frozen into ice sculptures before they could even get close. It was as if a huge white ice and snow lotus had bloomed on the ground. Hundreds of doomed soldiers were all sealed within. On the main battlefield, the duel between Hirschstein and the Sky Dragon King was the source of the source. Facing the onslaught of the Mirage Dragon's avatar, Hirschstein's poison-proof mask suddenly split open. His white teeth opened, and a black mucus was spat from his mouth. As soon as the mucus appeared, it attracted the surrounding venom like a vortex. In just a short moment, it turned into an ugly and hideous hell horse with only 3 legs.